In this video, we're going to show you how to install the wheel bearing on your Honda Ridgeline located behind your front wheel. Using a 22mm socket, you can loosen and remove your lug nuts. Once you have your lug nuts removed, go ahead and grab that wheel, remove it, and set it aside. Now with the wheel off, we're going to go ahead and separate our sway bar end link from our strut. In the center here is a number 5 Allen key. May or may not need that, but you are going to need a 17mm wrench or socket. Now normally you can go ahead and put a socket on here and use your impact gun and zip it off. In most cases, it's going to spin the shaft with the nut. So you're going to put a wrench on here. You're going to hold this with a number 5 Allen key. We have it on a ratchet. Now we did spray ours down with some rust penetrant. Let it soak for a little while. Sometimes you can use a little bit of heat if you need to. Spin that nut off, push that through. I like to go ahead and throw the nut back on here and then just set that aside. We have our ABS wire on the front side of our strut. We want to separate that. Mainly right here, you want to separate this here, but we will remove both. Use your pocket screwdriver and you're going to push in on this little tab. There's one here and then there's one on the other side. Pull that through and go ahead and do the same on this one. Follow the ABS wire onto the back side, and there's another clip right here. You're going to do the same thing. Press in on the little tab on either side, and just pop that out. Want to remove our outer tie rod. You may find a cotter pin right here. Now, cotter pins are a one-time use, so you'll want to be ready to have a replacement one of these available. And I'm going to bend out the leg here. Now, if yours is rusty or anything like that, you just got to do the best you can to get this out. Sometimes you just have to break it apart to get it out. Then use your cutters, pinch and pry, rock it out, pulling that out. Using a 21mm socket, loosen and remove the nut. Now, normally you can use a tie rod tool to go ahead and push this up and through. Other option is you can use a hammer and you're going to strike here on the knuckle, and you want to apply some upward pressure here. There it is. And normally the shock of this will pop the tapered portion of your tie rod end out. Set that aside. We're going to remove our caliper and bracket at the same time. There are two 19mm bolts we need to loosen and remove. We're going to do the bottom one first. Now we're going to hold on to this. Now before we remove this, you want to make sure that you have some sort of supporting tool. We have a hook like this here, or you can use a securing strap. We need to support this so that the weight isn't pulling on our flex hose, and we're going to do so by hooking this onto our caliper and bracket and hanging it on our strut up above. On the bottom here, we want to go ahead and separate our lower ball joint from our knuckle. In order to do so, you're probably going to find a cotter pin here, and we need to remove that. There's usually a little spring clip on the front side. Use your cotter pins. You want to go ahead and replace these ideally. So we're going to remove that. Now that we have our cotter pin out, we're going to use an 18mm wrench on here. And we want to go ahead and loosen this. Now our whole knuckle is spinning here. If you want to, you can swing your tie rod end over. You can pop that back in. I'm just going to throw the nut on here. It doesn't have to be tight, it's just going to keep it from popping out. So we had to apply some heat to the nut here, and then we put some rust penetrant on it. And you can see I'm wiggling the nut back and forth to try and clean the threads as we go. Now you want to go ahead and remove that nut the rest of the way. We're going to give ours a few minutes to cool off. You want to remove your brake rotor. We're going to use a Phillips head screw to remove the rotor locking screws here. Now, if yours does not have this, it is not critical. It's not critical to the operation. These are basically used during manufacturing to secure the rotor to the hub during assembly on the assembly line. If for any reason your screws strip out, simply take a drill bit and go ahead and drill out the center. Then you'll be able to go ahead and remove your rotor. Once you get your rotor off, if you did drill it out, be sure to remove the remainder of the stud out of the hole in the hub. Now I want to remove our ABS sensor from the knuckle. This is a 10mm bolt on the back side. Now we want to go ahead and grab our ABS connector here, and we want to go ahead and kind of twist this. The sensor itself goes through just beyond this, and then we have our bolt hole over here. So if you can, grab some pliers here and gently grab this, and you want to try and rock it back and forth and break that free. Sometimes you can use a small pocket screwdriver and get underneath the edge here. Now, sometimes these can break. If they do, you obviously want to replace it, but you want to be careful and try to get it out. And if you can get a little bit of a gap in there, you can go ahead and use some rust penetrant and soak it and see if you can get it to lubricate and come free. You can see ours is starting to move. So we're going to continue this process of working this with the screwdriver and spraying it down until we can go ahead and get that released. All right, we'll get our sensor released. Go ahead and set that aside and just hang that off to the side for now. Using a 24mm socket and a 24mm wrench, I want to go ahead, loosen and remove these nuts. Before we remove the bolts, we're now going to transition down and remove our axle nut. Now on your axle nut, normally right here on this dimple on the axle itself, the nut itself will be pinched down. There'll be a little dimple here pushing that down into this notch, which locks that nut in place. You're simply going to use a punch, put it in this notch and tap it a few times to go ahead and open that back up. Once you do that, use a 36mm socket to loosen and remove the axle nut. Your next step, you want to go ahead and push on that axle, and it should free float in and out of that hub. If it's stuck, you can go ahead and spray around here, right between the hub bearing itself with some rust penetrant. And then you want to use a punch. You would use a punch in the center here with a hammer and go ahead and give this a few smacks to try and loosen this up. And then you can grab the inside of the axle, push it back and forth until that is free floating. That's how you want it. Go ahead and remove your knuckle to strut bolts. As you pull this forward, which you might need a pry bar to get between the strut and the knuckle, just kind of separate these here. Push in on the axle as you're pulling the knuckle out. And what your goal is here to go ahead is pull this out You can go ahead and rotate this and pull this out. All right, go ahead and set that axle off to the side there. Now what you can also do is use a securing strap. Just to keep this up and out of the way. Next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and remove our knuckle from the lower control arm. Now, you can't pull up on it because that ball joint is wedged inside the bottom. You can do one of two things. You can simply hold the knuckle, and you're going to use a large hammer, and you're going to strike the knuckle itself to try and release that ball joint from there. Or you can use a securing strap, and you can go ahead and try and tie this up to the strut itself. You can, whatever you want to do to try and secure this so that it kind of relieves the weight off of this here. Whatever you feel comfortable with. You just want to make sure that you don't drop that knuckle on your foot or on your leg or anything like that. Make sure you're wearing safety glasses. You should feel it release. And there you have it. Now we have our bearing separator or a hub separator here on our bench. We have our knuckle in our vise. You can see our hub itself coming out. It not only pulled out our hub, but it pulled out a portion of our bearing as well, which is fine. We're just going to pull out the remainder of that bearing, and then we'll go ahead and pop this off. Now we have our hub in a vise. We're going to heat up the bearing race itself, get this to expand a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and pop this off. You can try and cut these off as well using a cutting wheel. You can use a chisel or something like that to work this off of the hub. Now working the bearing off, or the race itself, you want to be careful not to mark up the surface that the bearing is to get pressed onto. So just take your time with this here. Now we're just taking off the bearing cover here. There we go. With that off, go ahead and take a wire brush, a little bristle brush or something. We're going to clean off this here. And once again, normally when you're doing a job like this here, you want to replace the hub with the bearing. Going to be two separate pieces and you press them together. In our particular case, we're just doing the bearing. Now we have to go ahead and press the bearing out of our knuckle itself. Now there is a large snap ring right inside here. And you can see there's two little ears right there. Now you want to use your snap ring plier set. You're going to put them inside these holes and you're going to squeeze this, and you want to go ahead and open or actually close the snap ring and then work that out of the knuckle itself. In our case, our snap ring is a little bit rusted. We're going to go ahead and soak it down, and then we're going to go ahead and use our small chisel just to try and break the rust free, and then we'll go ahead and pull that out. Put some rust penetrant on here. Now that we got one of our ends out here, we're just going to run our screwdriver around and pop this out. Now, in some cases, you can reuse this clip. I'm gonna pop that out. At this point here, we're gonna go ahead and press out the rest of our bearing out of our knuckle. We have this set up in our press to go ahead and press out the remainder of the bearing. Now that we have our bearing out, I'm gonna go ahead and grab our knuckle. We're gonna use our bristle brush to clean this up, the ridge for our lock ring, and then we'll go ahead and press in our new bearing. Now we're installing our new bearing itself. We have the old bearing here, and we have the space properly to go ahead and press this in. Now we're using our standard stand-up 20-ton press opposed to our bench top unit, just to show you different options you can use to do this job. Now in doing this here, you do wanna pay attention to this here. You wanna make sure that that bearing is going in straight. Now once this is fully seated, the press will kind of get pretty stiff, and then we'll go ahead and release this. You want to be careful not to over press it and crush that bearing. Okay, that feels like it's seated pretty good. Release this. Now what we're going to be looking for here is we want to make sure that we have enough room around the edge here to install our snap ring, and it looks like we have that room, so we know that our bearing is pressed down far enough. Now when you install these bearings here, you want to pay attention. If you notice, the face of this here is all silver, and when we flip this over, the backside has the black ring. That is the magnetic pickup for your ABS. So you want to make sure that your bearing is pressed in with that black ring facing towards the hole for the ABS pickup. If you install this backwards, well, you're gonna have to press it back out, and there's a good chance you're gonna ruin the bearing. Now we went ahead and we sourced a replacement snap ring for our vehicle because ours was in really bad shape. But you're gonna use your pliers, your snap ring pliers, to squeeze that, compress it, and set that in. Now I want to go ahead and set that snap ring into that, so I'm just going to use my screwdriver. You can use a punch. And I'm just going to go around the perimeter. Make sure that's snapped into place. You can look around the edge and see that that is fully seated. Now if you're going to be replacing your backing plate, you can go ahead and do that now. In our particular case, we're not replacing our backing plate. We're just going to install it as is. Now we have our knuckle set up with our wheel hub. We're going to go ahead and press that in. You want to make sure that that wheel hub is going in straight. Now we also have a spacer underneath to support the center portion of the bearing. So when we're pressing in our hub, it doesn't push that center bearing portion out through the bottom. Okay, you can feel that our hub has seated. Make sure that's good and snug in there. Good, remove that. Feels perfect. Let's go ahead and install our knuckle. Go ahead and take that knuckle, slide over that ball joint. I'm going to remove our axle from our securing strap here, bring that down. Insert that into the back of the bearing. I want to go ahead and Push that spline through for the axle. You might go ahead and rotate this a little bit. Get that to line up a little bit better. There we go. And once you have the axle coming through, I'm going to go ahead and install our upper bolts here. Pull in or push out on that strut to get that to line up. Get our bolts started. Snug down the knuckle bolts. Install your axle nut. Snug that down. Install your ABS sensor. Slide that down inside. Get that bolt started. And once that's in there, just kind of snug that down gently. Don't want to over tighten it, but you're just securing the sensor in place. Install your ABS wire. There's a clip right here on the back. And then on the back side, we're going to install the retainer there. Install this clip. Install our clip up top. We're going to install our brake rotor. Now, if you are using these screws to secure your brake rotor, you want to make sure that you line them up appropriately. I'm going to remove our caliper off of the support hook. Bring this down. Install our upper bolt. Once you have that caught a few threads, go ahead and release that and it'll support itself. Install our lower bolt. All right, let's go ahead and snug those down. Install our flex hose. We're going to bolt this back to our strut. Now that we have that bolt started, you can tighten that down. Torque down your caliper bracket bolts here to 101 foot-pounds. Now you want to pay attention to the holes in the ball joint stud. These are for your cotter pin. You notice the notches in our nut here, so I want to pay attention to that. Go ahead and get that started. And then using our 19mm wrench, let's go ahead and snug that down. Now I want to torque this down to 69 foot-pounds. And we're doing so using a crow's foot on our torque wrench. Now you want to pay attention to the notch in your castle nut. Make sure it lines up with the hole in the ball joint stud. If it does not, continue to tighten the nut until the next slot opens up. Sometimes these are a little bit tighter. And our cotter pin is hitting the knuckle, so we're just going to use a flathead screwdriver and just kind of bend that up so we can work this in a little bit further, like so. Ideally, you just need to bend over one tab. Then use your cutters to cut off the excess. Torque down the strut bolts here to 156 foot-pounds. Go ahead and install your tie rod end. You want to pay attention to the direction of the hole for the cotter pin. Install that nut. Now let's go ahead and snug that down. Torque this down to 40 foot-pounds. Now, the next thing you want to do is locate that notch for that tie rod or for the cotter pin to go through. Now, for some reason, if the notch in the castle nut does not line up with the hole in the ball joint stud, you want to go ahead and continue to tighten the nut until the next notch lines up with it. Never loosen this nut for it to line up. Make sure you tighten it to the next opening and then install your cotter pin. Take your cotter pin, we're going to feed that through. And using my pliers here, I'm going to grab one end here. I'm going to fold that over. I'm going to snip off the excess. And then snip off the excess on the other leg. Now I want to go ahead and torque down our axle nut to 242 foot-pounds. What we're going to do is we're going to take 2 lug nuts, install them on 2 studs, and spin those down. Now we have our vehicle lower down closer to the ground, and because it's such a high torque spec range there, we're going to use some leverage with a pry bar to assist us doing this. If you have someone that is around, they can go ahead and hop into the vehicle and simply apply the brakes. They can hold that. But if you don't, here's a good way to do it. Set this up like so. Now you have the lug nuts on here to prevent you from damaging the threads. Use that as leverage and go ahead and torque down the axle nut. 242 foot-pounds. Once that's torqued, remove the lug nuts. We're not done yet. I want to go ahead and rotate this here. Now if you notice here, our axle has a little notch in it. What we want to do is you can use a punch and you want to go ahead and dimple the axle nut into that notch there. Just like so, and that keeps that nut from ever backing off until the next time it needs to be removed. You're all set now with that axle nut. Now I want to go ahead and install our sway bar end link up into our strut here, but you can see it's a little bit too low. So we're going to use our pry bar on our control arm and gently pry up on this here, and it's going to give us some adjustment here. Bring that up and just pull that in. Go ahead and get that nut started. Now we did spray it down with some rust penetrant as well as we put some anti-seize compound on there. I want to go ahead and tighten this down. We're going to remove our pry bar. I'm going to go ahead and torque this down to 40 foot-pounds. Go ahead and grab your wheel, line that up. We'll install our lug nuts. Once we have all of these started, we'll go ahead and snug those down. Let's now go ahead and torque down our lug nuts to 94 foot-pounds. When doing this, you want to do it in a crisscross or star pattern. You're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.